Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Mindful Techie Tuesdays, where we talk about all things mindfulness, technology, and productivity. I am your host, Miko Marquette Whitlock, and I'm excited to be talking with you today about a really important topic that's near and dear to my heart around technology exhaustion and virtual exhaustion. So we recognize that over the last several months, many of us have been spending more time in front of our devices. Many of us have been forced to spend more time working from home, working remotely, and that is beginning to take its toll for some of us. And so we are in need of some strategies to help us to deal with this increased dependence on technology. And that's the reason I'm excited to have my very special guest and friend, Beth Cantor, who is an expert trainer, facilitator. She can tell you more about herself in a few moments. But this is one of her areas of expertise. And we actually do a lot of work together. So I'm excited that we actually are able to have this conversation and to share some of the strategies that we found to be effective with organizations that we work with, quite literally all around the globe. So excited to have this conversation. But before we dive in, I want to invite you to like this video, to share this video with someone that you think could benefit from it, tag someone who needs to be a part of this conversation. This is such an important conversation that we all need to be having regardless of sector. And so I'm excited that you are here to join us. And so with that, Beth, I want to welcome you and give you an opportunity to say a little bit about who you are before we dive in.
Well, thank you, Miko, so much for inviting me on your show. And I just always appreciate a chance to spend time with you. And I was trying to remember how long we've been working together. It's been like a couple of years now, doing conference sessions and workshops. And I just really appreciate you as a thought partner and collaborator in different projects. So I've worked in the nonprofit sector for many years. I won't say how many, and I started, actually I'm trained as a classical flutist, and I started, when I realized I wasn't going to be a performer, I started working with arts organizations and fundraising. And then I, not too long after that, became a consultant, working in marketing and fundraising. And I was lucky early on that I discovered the internet. I didn't invent it. And this is like 25 years ago. There was a project at the New York Foundation for the Arts called ArtsWire. And they hired me to be the network trainer. And even though I didn't know how to set up a modem or really what the internet was. And so I had this really great opportunity to learn about the technology from the technologists and then teach it to artists and arts organizations. So in the very early days when email was new and even how to do a Google search, if you can imagine going to a training on that. And then from that, I kind of got more interested in nonprofit technology more broadly beyond the arts community. And I was an early adopter of social media. I had the first blog, Best Blog, and I wrote a book called The Network Nonprofit over 11 years ago, which was on how nonprofits could become more like networks. I wrote that with Allison Fine. And so I've my career has been to anticipate the next technology and help nonprofits learn about it. And you might wonder, my latest effort was the Happy Healthy Nonprofit, and which is not about technology specifically, but started noticing this burnout and malaise in our sector. This is 2015, 2016. And I felt like, okay, I need to write a book about this, and was happy to collaborate with Eliza Sherman on it. So I am a trainer, mostly either working around, I guess, digital resilience, either digital transformation or well-being in the nonprofit workplace.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited that you're here and that we were able to get you. We know that you have a busy schedule. And we also know that this is a topic that you have a lot of expertise on. So I'm excited to be able to really have this conversation. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty, I'm curious if maybe you could share with the audience how you as Beth are doing. There's so much happening in the world right now. And one of the things that I think is critically important when we have conversations like this is to acknowledge that the work that we do and how we are operating in our work and our personal lives doesn't exist in a vacuum. So there's so much going on in the world, and just let us know how you're doing, how are you holding up, how are you managing during this time?
Well, you can see I'm like this is my kit. We have a house that's just a really big room. So there's the kitchen, and you can't really see it. The couch is behind me, and my desk is here. I put it away at night, but and it's a fairly small space, and I'm here co-working with my husband, who's in the next room, and my children were at college. They're young adults now, are home from college, and they're attending classes in their bedroom. So we're adjusting to having a co-working / college dormitory. Mm-hmm. We have to like put boundaries around things. You may see somebody walking behind me during this interview, and that's okay. It is what it is. And I like everybody else, we've gone through different phases. When we first thought, oh, this is going to be like a snow day and it's going to be over. And, and now we're kind of settling in for the long term. And we've kind of starting to adjust. I've been working from home for 25 years, working remotely. So it's not that big of a shift for me. It's more having a lot more people around and trying to really focus on preserving mental health as much as I can. I have to keep on reliving and following my own advice, especially when I get off track. So making sure I get out for walks and that I'm doing artwork and that I'm not working all the time, taking breaks, all the stuff we're going to talk about.
Yes.
And trying to keep positive.
Yes. So let's talk a little about your work. So you shared your expertise and how you've gotten started. Can you share with the audience a little bit about how you've had to pivot in light of COVID-19 in particular?
Pivot work. You're talking about work or
yes,
just
work.
Life?
Has anything changed for you in terms of how you work?
It really hasn't, because I have been doing remote work for 25 years. Mm-hmm. So I have been facilitating virtual meetings for that long, and I've worked online. And the thing that's pivoted is that I used to do a lot where I travel, get an airplane and travel for 10 hours and land and do face-to-face sessions. So that's all gone, and I really miss that. But I was also doing a lot of remote sessions. So it's just that there's been an increase in the remote sessions. And I think as a result of that, I really, really miss being in the room with people and getting that feedback from a live audience and talking to people and being in a different place than my house. And so that's the part that's different and that I've had to adjust to. Okay.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into that and talk specifically about what you're seeing with clients. So if you could maybe give us the top 2 challenges that you're seeing with clients or organizations that you're working with in the current environment. Like, what are they asking you to support them with right now?
Well, as you can imagine, because most of my work is in this way, I just had a tsunami of requests to get training in online facilitation and meeting design. Mm-hmm. So I have been... I don't know how many trainings I've done, probably too many. So in fact, this morning before we got on, I was just working with an organization that's going to be doing a convening for 2 sets of meetings that are online, one with Zoom webinar, one with Zoom meeting. And the first one's for 3,000 people and the other is for 1,000. So, and they've never done that before. So starting at the very beginning with the kind of design and what's needed to produce this event and what's needed to facilitate it and how do you prepare your speakers, and then of course all the technical aspects. So I'm getting a lot of demand for that, from small meetings to big meetings and big sessions.
So lots of demand for help with meeting facilitation, meeting design. Is there anything else that you're seeing an uptick in terms of requests?
Well, like you, especially my work around workplace well-being and self-care. I've also gotten a lot of requests for trainings around how do you take care of yourself during, how do you create work-life balance when you're working from home. I also a lot of my work around the Happy Healthy Nonprofit was to facilitate staff sessions where they could focus on that. So staff retreats, and those were often done in person. So those have pivoted to online. So being able to facilitate those kinds of discussions, but remotely, where everyone's remote.
Okay. So I want to dive deeper into each of those topics. And maybe if we can start with the meeting facilitation and design. So it seems like one of the reasons there's been an uptick is because we're spending more time working remotely. Organizations probably have less experience with designing, particularly large gatherings remotely, and particularly where there might be the larger number of folks that are involved. Can you maybe walk us through, just at a really high level, some basic strategies that we should all be thinking about? So regardless of platform, how do we get started? Just take the example of the client that came to you and they said, we want to do this thing for 1,000 people. Where do we start? Like, what's the first step?
Well, I always teach clients about something called POP,
Okay.
which is purpose, outcome, and process. Which you can use this for your meetings, even if you're having a one-on-one. Like, what's the purpose and intent of the meeting?
Yes.
Like, what is the outcome? What will change? What will somebody learn? Will they think differently? Will they gain a skill? And then the process, and that's just a fancy way of saying a detailed kind of facilitator's agenda or agenda. What's going to happen when and for how long? And I think, with face-to-face stuff, we could get away with like kind of winging it and not really planning out our meetings, although I think we should to make them efficient and not as draining. But you really have to do that with anything online, even if it's just a staff meeting. You really should adopt kind of what's going to happen in the first 10 minutes, and that's going to be an icebreaker. And topic one, okay, and how much time will be allowed for that, for presentation versus discussion. Now clients are more about coming with a lot of exhaustion to these online meetings. So we're looking at how do you integrate more asynchronous activities. So really crafting a good facilitator outline. I mean, that's the first really good skill of a good facilitator is designing the session, and then it's delivering on that. Then there's a lot of techniques that you would use if you're in the room with somebody, and then some of those techniques then transfer through the platforms.
Okay, so a couple questions for you. So one of them is just a level set question. So you use the word facilitator. So if I'm in an organization, I've just been put in charge of making something happen. Like, can you describe, like, when you say facilitator, what do you mean? Like, who is this person? What do they actually do to help the meeting flow?
Okay, so they put the agenda together. They make sure that that everyone who should be invited to the meeting is invited, and that people aren't invited to the meeting who don't need to be at that meeting, because that's a big time waster. That happens. So we're going to have everybody here, but everybody doesn't necessarily have to be there, and especially when we have so many meetings. So so that they're also going to make sure that they're going to assign different topics to different people, and those people are going to be prepared, and there's going to be time limits on those different topics, and that person is actually going to, I say, facilitate the meeting, keep time, traffic cop discussion, make sure that they're taking notes, or that there is a note taker. I also like to have other roles at meetings, like rabbit hole monitor, which is a fun one. How many meetings go off track because we go down rabbit holes, but for people to pull them back. So that's the role of the facilitator. And then, of course, once the meeting's finished, there's some follow-up, like the bullet point action steps after the meeting, and making sure that's distributed to folks in a timely way after the meeting.
So what I hear you saying is, in terms of making the best use of our time and designing an effective meeting, it's probably not a good idea to just show up and try to figure out what you want to talk about when people are there, and then sort of have another meeting to then figure out what you talked about and what the action steps are. It sounds like there has to be some forethought on the front end of the process to make it effective for folks. Is that right?
Yeah, it's before, during, and after.
Okay.
The facilitator shepherds the meeting. And, in the before, they might put a draft agenda together, and they might need to get some feedback from some folks, about, are these the topics that should be discussed? Okay, we need a 60-minute meeting, or we need a 75-minute meeting, or a 30-minute meeting, and then making sure it gets in the calendar.
Yes.
And then all the facilitation during the meeting, and then, of course, the follow-up.
So you mentioned earlier that sometimes for in-person meetings, we can get away without maybe some of this level of planning that you're talking about. Can you describe what you mean when you say that you really need to do this for virtual meetings? Why is it that the virtual meetings require a bit more sort of, I guess, planning or care in your regard? Yeah, prep.
Well, Okay, so because, like, I'll take the example I was working on this morning. I mean, this is a big meeting, and they were going to have. It was a 2-hour meeting, 2.5-hour meeting, and the first was like kind of a plenary session with 5 different speakers. So it's kind of like, okay, so how much time are they? How much time are they being allotted? Are they going to be using slides? How? Okay, so you have 3,000 people. Okay, so we're going to have a Q&A monitor, a monitor Q&A box. How do you want to manage this? Who's going to be the person monitoring all the questions that are coming in and is going to feed them to the moderator? Are your speakers and people presenting at this meeting, are they comfortable using the platform? Okay, we have to, if you tell them to prepare 10 minutes of content, are they going to prepare 50 minutes of content? Those sorts of things. So there's and then you don't want the whole thing to be derailed because there's a technical problem. So you also, either because the technology failed or because somebody pushed the wrong button during the session. So you want to have rehearsal. To go through your run a show. So you know that the tech's going to work, or how you're going to solve tech problems. So it's not just like, hey, we're just going to do this. It requires, some advanced thought and a plan.
Okay. So with that, so advanced thought and a plan, then how does someone determine if they actually need to have a meeting, right? Because I think sometimes the meeting is a default response for, getting a status update, or in the case that you mentioned, we have this funding, or we've always done it this way, and so now we're just going to do it virtually. Like, what are the things people should be asking themselves as an organization or as a team to figure out if it's actually necessary to have a meeting?
I'm sure, and that was a great question even pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, a point of pain. So, I mean, let's say it's a staff meeting and it's like once a month staff meeting and everybody gets together and then there's like a 10-minute or 5-minute report from everybody and it goes on for 3 hours and people are just sitting there listening, have we thought, is that the best use of everyone's time? Would it be better to have those reports as pre-work to the meeting and have us just really discuss something that we need to decide in real time? Because we're, especially now, since we're all working remotely, which means more of our calendar is filled with meetings.
Yeah.
I don't think we have that luxury to have meetings like that anymore. So I've been experimenting a lot with clients to have them adopt different types of meeting, like the silent meeting. I love the silent meeting. Have you been doing silent meetings?
With myself.
Well, with the group it's where you allocate maybe the first 15 minutes for everyone just to read the report that you're going to be discussing. And maybe there's a couple of questions. And then you have the discussion versus assuming everyone's going to have the time to read it and assimilate it, or to spend the time actually regurgitating the report for everybody in real time. It's probably better to have each person do a silent meeting. Each person reads the link to the report, actually sitting there during the meeting. So you have parallel working, you're presencing with each other. And that also helps with connection. And then you discuss it. And it has cut the drain time from meetings.
I love that idea, because you sort of just show up. There's no pressure. If you had time to prep, you have. If you haven't, then there's like no judgment. We're going to do this together. I love that. And
you can even integrate that technique in different ways in shorter bursts. Technically in training, it's called a think and write.
Yes.
So we've done things where we might have meeting norms that we reaffirm every time we have a meeting.
So what's the meeting norm?
A meeting norm is the way we're going, or kind of etiquette guidelines maybe, on how we're going to be together in our meetings. It's for a group that meets regularly.
So we agree on guidelines, or is that what you mean?
Yeah. And a team guideline, and maybe you might have a session co-designing those at the front. At the beginning, and then you introduce them in each meeting. And so, like, assume good intent, give the meeting your full attention, don't multitask and do other work, give everybody voice, respect everybody's opinion. Those are just examples, but the group just determines what those norms are. So instead of like spending 5 minutes saying, here are our meeting norms, they're blah, 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 you could say, could everybody take a moment and read the slide or review the meeting norms and just write one that you're going to hold for this meeting in the chat.
I love that.
You know, and it becomes a thing there where it gives everyone permission to like adopt them. Because sometimes like somebody might write the meeting norms and then you never refer to them again. Mm-hmm. But they're living documents, and you know, and that's a great way to kind of shift and train a team culture or a meeting culture.
Awesome. So these are really good tips. I love the silent meeting. I love the co-collaboration or the collaboration with creating the norms and how you actually reshare the norms and refresh people's memories. So those are really awesome tips. So I do want to move us on and talk about exhaustion and well-being, but I'm curious, is there anything else that sort of pops up for you in terms of the biggest challenges? Maybe there's another strategy you want to share really briefly on the meeting facilitation and design piece.
Well, I also want to like emphasize, re-emphasize that, okay, so there's beautifully designing a meeting, but then there's also thinking about all of the meetings that an organization has, if we're talking to orgs, within the week. And to really think about having enough spaciousness in people's schedules that we're not so crammed with back-to-back meetings without even time to pee, really, you know. You know, but my ideal, I don't always have it, but I pretty much have it, is like I'm going to have one morning meeting, one afternoon meeting. If I'm pressed, I might have a third meeting in there, but there's going to be space in between that. So I can process, I can follow up, and I'm not exhausted.
I love that. And, you know, I have a different approach to that, but I recommend the basic principle, right? So for me, like I have a policy where it's called no meetings Monday. So I don't have meetings on Mondays outside of the meeting that I have with my team on Monday evenings. Outside of that, I don't schedule any client meetings. Same thing with Friday. So Friday afternoons, I don't schedule any meetings. I don't know if you've noticed just the folks that you work with, like the clients and organizations you work with, but I've noticed that folks are really good at scheduling the meetings, but they're not so good at scheduling the work, right?
Exactly.
So if you're working on the annual report, right? Or if you're working on a fundraising campaign,
put in that time and you're like, that's the other thing too, that I like when I talk about spaciousness, like, because every meeting is going to generate some tasks and some to-dos, either that you have to prepare for it or that you're going to have to follow up from it. And so, and your schedule only has so much time and your brain can only handle so much. So you have to like accept that you're not going to do everything and that you have those limitations. And the calendar is a really good tool for that, right?
Yes.
As long as you're not trying to cram in 18-hour days and 7 days a week, you know?
Yeah, you got to be realistic. And
like put that limitation of only a certain amount of hours per week, and then have those boundaries around. I have my Monday morning. I don't have meetings on Monday mornings unless it's a rare occasion that I do. Sometimes I have to, and I don't have them on Friday afternoons.
Yeah, and I tell people to be flexible, right, and know like what it is. So like if it's a life or death emergency, or if Oprah calls, I'll take a meeting with Oprah on Mondays, you know. But outside of that, you want to be mindful of sort of setting those boundaries and sticking to those where you can, and even doing it as an organization. The last organization I worked with, you know, we had folks working across time zones and across the world, and getting people physically together in one room was a logistical challenge. And so we instituted meeting week, right? So we just knew that, okay, well, everybody from across the world is going to be here, you know, and we do this once a quarter or whatever it is, and we just like whatever you need to meet face to face about, like this is your opportunity to do that. And folks could adjust their schedules and their expectations.
I've seen that with a lot of like no fly weeks where if in an organization you can't schedule outside meetings.
Yeah.
And then I've seen variations of it, and this gets to more of helping people get stuff done, but having catch-up days where or no meeting days that you know you're not even allowed to talk to people, but it's that a half day a month, or if you're lucky, maybe a full day a month where you're focused on getting that deep thinking work done, or reports and planning for the next month, so that you're not so scheduled that all you have time for is the meetings. Because that's what leads to burnout, is this
absolutely
too full schedule. You're only in meetings, and then of course you still have to get the work done. So then you work evenings and you work weekends, and it's not sustainable. I know,
Yeah.
I can tell you it's not sustainable.
Yeah, and 2 points I want to make on this before we transition is that using your calendar effectively actually gives you a better sense of what your capacity and bandwidth is, so that you can more effectively say yes and no to things.
Exactly.
Because sometimes we say yes to things and we it's with good intention, because we think, oh yeah, I have time to do that. But like, if you actually plotted out all the things on your to-do list on your calendar, like, you would realize, I think in most cases, that you actually have too many things, right? And you don't have enough time. So you actually need to take some things away or renegotiate deadlines and expectations, right?
I hate doing that. So I've gotten to the practice now on my Mondays when I don't have meetings. I save up all those requests for meetings to evaluate, and I actually go through, if it's a speaking request, or if it's a meeting with somebody that's a network meeting, or whether it's a meeting as part of a project. I look at it and okay, this is an hour, and when can I do this? And what do I need to prepare for this? And is there likely to be follow-up? And I really like to schedule those together so I can look ahead and see where I'm going. If not, I end up like overscheduling myself. And
yeah,
I mean, even if I have the spaciousness, I not overschedule, I don't know what the word for it is. I underestimate the amount of time of even just blocked out time, not like that I've made, that I've budgeted to do the task.
Yes.
Then I'm completely overloaded and stressed out, and that's not fun.
You're overcommitted.
Yes.
The other thing,
that's a good term.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is I was reading a report on remote work. I forget which company put it out, but one of the points that really resonated with me is they talked about the idea that if you invite 20 people to a meeting and it's 1 hour long, it's not really a 1 hour meeting, it's a 20-hour meeting, because each person has given up an hour to be there. And so I find that is a useful frame for organizations to think about. If you're, in my view, meetings should really be, particularly when it comes to collaboration, meetings should be the last resort that you use to bring people together, right? And we should think clearly about some of the other ways, depending on what goal you're trying to get to, before you arrive at, okay, we're definitely going to have a meeting. Because when you commit to that, it's time, it's resources, and to your point, it's the before, during, and after that comes along with that. It's not just like you get the meeting. It's like a puppy, right? So like, if you get a free puppy, the puppy might be free, but then you got to buy dog food and you got to walk it, and
right. You got to clean up after it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. And another thing, you just made me think about, like, when you asked before pivoting.
Yeah.
Some of my work would be, there would be cadence to face-to-face and then remote. But because we could be face-to-face and because you could travel, we could have like a more intense face-to-face planning session, a day and a half, where we would plan, have the retreat or develop the plan for the year. And now, because we can't do that, we're having to like chop it up.
Yes.
And then, because of everyone's full schedules, really having to think even further about what can be done asynchronously. I always mispronounce that, to save that real time.
So you've said that word a couple of times. So for folks that might not be familiar with that or might not know exactly, maybe they heard it, that they're not sure what it means. What do you mean when you say that?
Okay, well, and usually my husband's in the background to correct my pronunciation on the term. No, he just left. Asynchronously, which means we're synchronous because we're in the same time space, right?
Right. We're talking to each other in real time.
Right. So we're synchronous. Asynchronous would be that the asynchronous part of this discussion was when you went off and you designed the whole program and the list of questions and lined up the technical stuff. And I went off and I looked at the questions and I figured out if I was, my answers for those, so I was prepared. And then maybe some of our follow-up tasks after this, which would be to promote the session. So those are asynchronous tasks because we're not sitting together in real time doing them. We're doing them on our own schedule.
Okay. Perfect.
So that's the kind of design that we really need to get, and I'm getting better at too. That's the new thing, I think.
Yeah. Well, awesome. So, anything else on meetings before we pivot to the next segment? Anything else?
No, I think we both want a T-shirt that says this meeting could have been an email, right?
Absolutely. So let's pick up on this piece of exhaustion. So you mentioned exhaustion earlier, and part of it is from the back-to-back meetings, but there's some other stuff going on with how our brains process the technology. And then this also connects to just the larger bucket of things that you're doing around well-being with organizations. So let's dive into this by me asking you the question: if you could wrap it up in terms of the top 2 or 3 challenges you're seeing as it relates to this exhaustion issue or well-being in the current virtual workplace environment, what would those be? What are you seeing? What are you hearing from folks?
Okay, so the Zoom exhaustion.
Okay, what is Zoom exhaustion?
Okay, so that's it's just the kind of level of attention that it takes to be staring at someone on the video screen and sitting and paying attention to Zoom. So, and there's different ways to unpack that. There is hyper self-awareness. So I can look here and say, oh, look, you can see the back, you can see my living room, kitchen. You can see, oh, my hair, my face. So we're not used to kind of being with other humans and staring at ourselves in the mirror. So that can lead to exhaustion because it's nonverbal overload. There's also this thing called the self-complexity theory, which is that we have the ability to be different people in different roles of our lives. Like when I'm at home, and when I'm at work, and I'm necessarily two different people. But I don't have that now because here I'm at home, but I'm at work. And that can lead to negative self-talk and negative thoughts. There's also I'm not doing it now, but there's this huge temptation because you can only see, we can only see our faces up shoulder length. But I could be, looking at my email, and I could be multitasking, or I could be telling my kids not to come in the room. And as you know, and we've talked about it a lot, it's not really multitasking, because we're shifting between the two different things, and that's exhausting. It's the sitting that we're doing now, and not the lack of movement, and that's preventing blood getting up to our brains, and you get brain fog, and your shoulders and your back starts to hurt. So it's that we talk a lot about doing the importance of stretching and having a standing desk. So there's all that going on and a lot more when we're having these technology mediated experiences.
So it's not just that we are spending more time working from home, but it's that our bodies respond differently, number one, to this technology facilitated communication, right? Because we're having to in person. There's less work that our brains have to do to bridge the gap between, okay, is like, I'm trying to read Beth's face right now. Like, so like, what's on her, what is she thinking? Is she enjoying this? Is she having fun?
You can't.
Exactly.
You can't. And or also like if I was in your office with you and face to face, I can sort of do it now, but I would have other inputs and other ways to be stimulated besides just staring at a screen. It could be the feeling that's in the office. I could be looking at other artwork that's on your wall. Maybe I could hear. I know you're in the city, so maybe the window might be open and I could hear the city noises. Maybe have just cooked something. There'd be a wonderful smell, or maybe we'd be having tea and there'd be a nice wafting of peppermint tea. So there'd be more stimulation of our senses if we were face to face versus you're in your little window and I'm looking at you and I'm in mine, and then there's this delay that's happening. I don't know what it is here, but on Zoom it's 1.5 seconds. Mm-hmm. So it's not as natural as being face to face.
So what do you say to the folks that are they're not fans of the remote work, and they probably, wish that they think people that probably aren't working hard, they're probably, goofing off or whatnot. And, the media is just blowing this Zoom exhaustion thing out of proportion. It's not really real. We're just sort of making it up as an excuse to not get work done. Like, how do you respond?
Have you heard that? Have you really heard that? Oh, don't answer that. I know the answer. Okay.
So for the skeptic, maybe someone has a boss that's like, yeah, I don't really believe that. We're gonna meet. We're gonna have this 5-hour meeting.
No, well, the first thing is like they're goofing off is to honor deliverables versus screen time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's unrealistic to expect that we're going to be sitting here at your beck and call if you should happen to email and I'm going to respond to it right away, or I'm going to be in 5-hour Zoom meetings. I mean, it's actually, I think it's physically dangerous to do that, to be sitting for so long, and you don't want to endanger people's health. And all managers want you to be more productive, and that's really going to zap productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And it could lead to physical problems. And when you're overwhelmed and and your body's responding with stress hormones, that's not good for our mental or our physical health. And we want people to have good well-being during this difficult time.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure people would agree with that, right?
Yes.
And still get work done.
Yes.
And the way for that is not to operate on is to realize that, we have to work in a different way.
Yes. And the other thing I would add to that is that there's actually an evidence base, right? And so I'm not a research scientist, but there is evidence that actually backs up all the things that we're talking about. So when you talk about Zoom exhaustion, there's scientific evidence that shows that our brain is functioning differently when we're experiencing communication that's mediated by something like a Zoom or like what we're doing right now, as opposed to in person, right? It's more taxing, as we just talked about, and there's evidence to back that up. So
there's also evidence too. I mean, this is pre-pandemic that, working long hours or the hero hours really don't increase productivity. And I think the study was something like, if you're working over 45 hours per week,
over 55, I think 55 is the max.
55, you're right. 55, you're getting the same amount of returns if you're working 80. So you might as well take that amount of time and refresh your brain, refuel.
Yeah, and the refreshing is, it's not just it's not people being lazy. It's like your body actually needs to recharge. Your body actually needs to regenerate. I am sort of moving to a different season of my life in terms of fitness. And one of the things I'm learning about fitness is that in order for you to have your body work at its tip-top shape, you have to get sleep, right? So it's not like it's not like I'll sleep when I'm dead type thing. It's like, no, you actually need it to function.
And also I just listened to a phenomenal interactive session. It was audio, and they had this founder of this company who created this device that could continuously monitor your glucose levels, which until now you had to be diagnosed. It was a medical device. You had to be diagnosed by a doctor as having diabetes, but it really helped you understand your metabolic health. And one of the things he said was that through the research, that if you don't get enough sleep, that's when your glucose will soar. And that he was, there was one point where he hadn't gotten a lot of sleep, and he decided, okay, so I'm going to see how my body reacts to eating something with a lot of sugar. And so he did it, and he took his levels on it, and what it came back as he would have been diagnosed as being a diabetic. And that's, with sky high blood sugar levels, and what that's doing is just, it's not good. Your ability to have mental clarity.
Yes.
It's not good for your heart. It's just not good for your body. So the lack of sleep, I think, is a huge contributor to illness and burnout, and also having mental clarity and the ability to concentrate. So protect your sleep. It's your most vital asset.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And I think I've read somewhere that, being extremely exhausted is actually, in terms of driving, is probably worse than being drunk or comparable.
Yes. I think they found that there's an increase in accidents because of that.
Yeah. So what are the strategies? So we just described some of the challenges that folks are dealing with, but what are the top, let's say, 1 or 2 strategies that you recommend for folks that, okay, they say, okay, Beth, I believe you. I believe the evidence that this is real. But what do I do? How do I actually address this issue? How do I not feel drained at the end of my days? What say you, Beth?
Okay, I say, okay, so my first overall recommendation, I'm talking about the individual first, is to cover the basics, that the health pyramid, okay? So that's get that level of exercise that you need. Make sure maybe you're substituting your commute for a morning walk, if the air quality is good.
Okay.
For those of you in California, like I am. So get your baseline exercise. I have a Fitbit. My goal is to get 15,000 steps a day, which is about 7 miles. I honestly can't do it when the air is bad, but so then I've knocked it down. I'm going to try to get 10,000 or 7,500, and practice exercise snacking. And exercise snacking is one of the best things you can do for your metabolic health. Is to do brief intervals of some exercise, even if it's just taking a 10-minute walk around the block. Yes. And that can also give you a break from the Zoom exhaustion and wake up your brain. So exercise, healthy diet, food, what we put in our bodies, our food, has so much influence on how we feel. I mean, today, this time is not the time to be eating French fries, ice cream, and wine, although I really would like that right now. But, in moderation, maybe, try to think of healthy foods and what you're putting in your body. And then, of course, getting a good night's sleep. The National Sleep Foundation says 6 to 8 hours per night. And that means maybe you're going to bed earlier. Maybe you're not watching that next episode on Netflix.
Yes.
Maybe
it'll be there for you.
It'll be there for you. Maybe it's putting your phone on a phone charger in the other room and not looking at email before bed. Having a bedtime ritual and making sure you're getting good sleep. So important.
Yeah, and what you've pinpointed, if I'm just sort of summarizing, the first thing I heard you say is something that, well, I'm going to use my language that I tend to use, but the first thing you mentioned is about, taking the walk in the morning or having some kind of routine, reclaiming your commute time or replacing your commute time is so critically important. Many of us, we discount the fact that if we were working in an office, or even if we were working remotely, that many of the folks we were working with were commuting to an office. So we had that time to transition from, home life to switching into work mode. And so now we don't have that where we're on the train or we're sitting in traffic or we're stopping into Starbucks or stopping into the break room. So we're missing that. The other thing you shared is in terms of just the sleep and the food. These are just really basic things that we need that function as part of the human experience, generally speaking. And that doing these basic things actually makes a huge impact in our ability to be able to show up for ourselves, for our families, and for our teams at work.
And also, it also has a payoff of building your immune system, and we especially to strengthen it. I mean, basic things, and we all need strong immune systems, especially. Yes. And I think the other thing I would say is to have some time where you can have quiet reflection. Yes. And quiet time for yourself. And I know you're so great at promoting meditation and teaching meditation practices. I've gone a different direction. And also I've seen a lot of research lately. Again, another lecture talking about, again, from a medical perspective about stress hormones and what it's doing to your body and what meditation can do, but also actually writing with a pen.
Yes.
The sort of the hand to brain, that is lighting up another part of your body that is preventing the production of these stress hormones. Yes. So I've taken to, for years, journaling, in the morning, having, I have a gratitude journal, or I plan out, I have my intention planner. It's handwritten, but similar to the kinds of things that you're doing with your intention. Yes, our intention planner. I mean, that's part of. And why I have this thing of all these magic markers. Let me see, where do I go? Right here. See, that's just one of them, because it's, it's calming and it's a ritual and it is producing the calm effect and helping me focus and slow down and take a breath.
It's interesting that you said that. It's one of the reasons that I've been intentional about making the intention planner paper-based. So lots of folks have asked for an electronic version. But one of the things that I'm supporting people with, and that you and I do similar work in this area, supporting people and taking a more balanced approach to the technology in their life. And to your point about the morning routines and the journaling, I found that actually planning your day, what you're going to do, writing out your intention, writing all that out by hand, actually is a powerful way to activate that connection that you were talking about with the brain, right? And
Yes.
to also have that quiet time where you're disconnected from your devices, right? Like you're not looking at a calendar, you're not looking at email, you have some time to sort of rejuvenate before you dive into that. And then the last thing one of the last things you mentioned was around the bedtime ritual, which is so important, right? So setting a time, like having a bedtime, right? Like a cutoff time, but then having a time before you actually get into the bed where you putting away the work, you're putting away the devices so that your body, your brain has an opportunity to settle down and actually to help you to get a good night's sleep. So it's not like you're, the last thing you see is, you're looking at CNN or, whoever liked your post on Facebook, right? That's probably not the best idea to have that be the last thing that you see or hear before you go to bed. But yeah.
And you should also have a waking ritual, which I'm trying to instill. So you're not like rolling out of bed and going to work, especially if you're working at home and you have a small space and there's your workspace, or or grab your phone and look at your email. I don't want that to be, the first thing upon waking up out of bed. So what I've been doing lately, it's been really interesting. I think you should try it. Someone shared this and I thought it was a great idea. I've been keeping a dream journal because at the beginning of the pandemic, I started having like really weird dreams. I don't know if you did. Like I had weird dreams about like traveling for work. and so I thought, oh, this is interesting. And so now I've been trying to keep a dream diary. I know it sounds like a little new agey, but it's just giving like a wake up, and you can train yourself to remember what your dream was and by writing it down. So it's like just another way to like wake up slowly.
Yeah.
Write down what that dream was, and maybe move into some like breathing, and then I also have my little morning coffee ritual.
Yeah.
And I have journaling, and then if I go out and I take my walk, sometimes I have, I could take a longer walk. Sometimes it's a short walk, and then I'm starting my day.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome. And I think that what I'm hearing is that there are so many ways people can do this. When I think about how I start my day, and I only recommend the first part if you don't have an issue with being on your devices. So for me, I don't have an issue with my devices first thing in the morning. And so I actually use my phone as my alarm clock. But I don't recommend this if you are one of those folks that's addicted to your devices, right? So for me, yeah, I
had to I can't use it as an alarm clock. Nope.
I have my notifications turned off. I don't respond to text message or anything like that until after I have sat down at my work desk essentially to start my day. But I raise all that to say that one of the things that has been helpful for me is to when you think about alarm, like who wants to wake up alarmed? Jay Shetty, he's a popular influencer, talks about this idea, and so I actually use the sound of a round of applause.
I use birds.
Yeah, for my wake up. So yeah, using birds, so different sounds to help you with that. And then I have my own ritual where after I go to the bathroom, I do a bit of meditation, a bit of prayer. I do a workout, and I have my protein shake, and then I plan out my day by writing. Look at my calendar. And then I sit at my desk, and then if I have any text messages that have come in, I'll respond to those, and then I get to work.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you, I didn't used to do that. I mean, like 10 years ago, I would like roll out of bed and get to work, and I never took that time for myself. And I can tell you, occasionally I go get back, into ruts, not a rut, or into a thing where it's like I do that, but it's not my norm, but I really feel it. I really feel the difference when I have disrupted my morning routine.
Yes.
And I felt it at the very beginning because I don't know, at the very beginning of the pandemic, I felt a lot of anxiety initially,
Hmm.
and it was because it was very disruptive to our family, and it disrupted my routine, and I felt that, you know.
Yeah.
So I can't just, if anyone wants to believe me, the morning routine is so important.
Yes.
Create one for yourself and guard it like a dog with a bone.
And one of the things I want to emphasize is that the tips that we're talking about, they're so basic. But one of the things that I've learned is, and Mel Robbins talks about this, she's another person that talks about really being productive and being useful in terms of intentional how you approach your day. And she says, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound really simple that you're not going to want to do it. But I want to encourage folks to really take to heart that what we're talking about, they sound really basic in principle, but actually doing it makes a big difference. And that's the way that we really move to a new level of mastery and excellence in our lives and how we're serving, at work and at home. But Beth, I want to ask you as we wrap up, I want to ask you one final question, and then I want to have an opportunity to do some final thoughts and let us know how folks can reach you, work with you if they choose to reach out to you. So I did a radio interview on Saturday, and one of the questions that I was asked was about FOMO. So fear of missing out. And it was in the context of, missing out on opportunities because you're not available and on 24/7. And I'm curious how given your expertise in working with organizations, and, you and I do complementary work, how do you respond to this question about, well, I understand the need to set boundaries, but what if I miss out on something that's really important? Like, what if Oprah calls or something and I miss out on it, or I miss the email? Like, how do you respond to that?
Oh, I love that. Well, I'm sure if Oprah calls, she'll call again. No,
Well, there you go, folks.
Yeah, I don't know. I heard this other term, and you've probably heard it too. Forget FOMO. JOMO is where it
Yes,
is.
joy
It's
of
the
missing
joy of
out.
missing out, right? So, and I had to learn this because I definitely had FOMO because I think the technology addiction, that's part of it. Like, oh, I don't want to stop. It's so interesting, or I want to get to the next, episode in Netflix.
Mhm.
It's like, stop. It'll be there tomorrow. Leave something for tomorrow. You're not going to miss anything. And also another thing too. I used to, because this is 6 or 7 years ago when I was at the height of blogging and curating content. I would tell myself, I can't not stop curating because I'm going to miss something really important, right? That I'm going to have to learn about. And what I noticed is that when I started to pull back, it was okay because things surface again.
Yes.
Themes surface again. An article will be recirculated, or
Yes.
I'll hear about it. And I started gradually practicing stepping back, and pulling back from FOMO, and nothing bad happened.
Yes, and I would echo what you said when it comes to social media or coming to Netflix. It's going to be there. The other thing I would offer too is that this with this particular issue requires us to set boundaries, and that does mean that we might miss out on something, right? But I would offer to folks that something that is meant for you, you're not going to miss out on, right? And if it's meant for you, and it's aligned with how you have set up your life in terms of the balance that we're talking about, then it's going to be there for you. And so if it's not aligned, then maybe you have to give that up and you make a decision that that's not the right thing, right? So,
or else another way to think about it, if you, let's say, I know you're big, like I think your favorite word is intention. If you do set your intentions, right?
Mm-hmm.
You won't have any fear of missing out because you know where to look for the thing and you have a plan to look for the thing and you don't need to be there. So it comes to you, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Beth, this has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate you making the time. The time has just sort of flown by. I think we might have to have you come back and, really dive a little bit deeper into some of these topics. But is there anything in the last few moments as we begin to wrap up that you want to leave our audience with? Is there one or two like nuggets, if like above all else, that you want to leave folks with?
Well, we're approaching what might probably be a very chaotic and stressful time in our country, and
that's for the U.S. in the U.S. for folks
in the U.S.
Yeah.
Right, and even around the world because of COVID, and if you haven't taken this pause in society to really look inward and rebuild your resilience, it's a great time to do it, and it's just going to be needed, at least in the short term, to give you hope and maintain optimism for the reinvention and the good things that are coming on the other side of this.
Absolutely. Now is the perfect time to do that and to take time to unplug and actually by hand begin to journal and reflect on some of those things. You can get the intention planner. Beth has resources on her blog and website, and you can create your own. There are tons of options that are available for folks that are out there. So Beth, how do folks reach you? How do we get in contact with you if we want to just continue this conversation? We want to hire you for some of the wisdom you shared with us today. How do we reach you?
You can go to my website, www.bethkanter.org. I love how it just popped up there. and from there, you can find my social channels. Although you won't find me there all the time on social.
Exactly, because you're practicing. Exactly.
Immediately, but I will get back to you.
Yeah. So Beth is a practitioner of JOMO, or joy missing out, which means she's not going to be available 24/7, but she will be available. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. For folks that are joining us again, I would just want to thank you for being a part of this conversation, whether you're watching live, you're watching the replay. I want to invite you to love, to like, to share this conversation, to tag someone who you think could benefit from this conversation. And let us know in the comments what questions you have or what feedback you have. And until next time, this has been another Mindful Techie Tuesday conversation where we talk about all things mindfulness, technology, and productivity. I am your host, Miko Marco Whitlock, and I want to thank Beth Kanter, and also I want to thank Carlos Gonzalez in the background, who's our digital producer and engineer.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.